I'd say today is a little bit of a smorgasbord of different topics that all relate to trying to, as the states, make our family history successful. I think many of us have something like, I have a screenshot up here on the right side. We've got like a bunch of family members that we put in these different folders, and we have documents, we have photos, we have certificates, other things that kind of build a digital repository around a particular person. And that's really cool, except no one is ever going to use it, right? And that's a hard fact for ourselves. Like, yes, maybe there will be some other interested relative who will port some of those files over and have them just to collect, almost as if you were collecting baseball cards. But they're not really immersing themselves in the material that you have provided. So I've been asking myself and working the last couple of years on how do I take my family history and all the research I've done, some of which I think is really nifty and cool, and translate it into something that I think my children will consume and other family members could consume as well. Children isn't my only concern, so I don't want it to be viewed from that. I think many of us have even probably typed out some material. We might have a Word document, done little biographies, but it's still written in such a way that it just isn't accessible enough to really be leveraged by their family members. So I'm going to be talking through a lot of different ways that I feel like you can engage your children and other people within family history. And I wanted to approach this from different angles. Some of it is your own family history in terms of the family you have right now, the history you yourself are making as a family. I'm going to talk about photo books as it relates to some of that, different learning tools that can engage you or other people, participatory family history, so like actual things that you might go and do. I give an example later on, which is like one of my ancestors was a fisherman in northeast England. And guess what? He was really good with fishing knots. This is in some of his family history. Going through and learning some of those knots is a way of connecting with him, and my kids, like getting to try to do some of these really tough knots can be exciting for them. There's, collecting and updating books, which I'll get to, and then actually publishing your own books. Any questions on that before I dive in? Okay, I'm getting head shakes. This is good. I'm going to talk first about personal family history. So, how do you get your kids just talking about and recording their own lives? Like, yes, there's the Christmas newsletter that some of us do at the end of the year, and we send out with our Christmas cards. It has little blurbs on what the family's been doing, but it's very kind of choppy and approached from the angle of the adult. This is what I see most of the time. What I like about other resources like Get to Know Your Kid and Keepsake, which I'll be bringing up too, is that they allow you to kind of really approach more the family history that you're making from your kids' level. So they've got tons of great prompts. This is the book, as you can see here. I've been using it with my kids for the last 4 years, and it allows you to ask, very kind of personalized questions to them, which, they can, respond to. And if you write it as the way they say it, it's very much more authentic to them. So I have this little, comic bubble on the side, which is like, hey, do you remember your dreams? Is the prompt. Can you tell me about one of them? And this is from Liam. He's like, once when I was 4, I had a dream and I was scared of a monster in the closet. I tried to get mom, but the door wouldn't open and the monster came out. Another time I encountered a T-Rex in the hallway of the cruise ship. I really like that, the T-Rex at the cruise ship. But those sorts of details, as you can imagine, when my son's older and trying to connect with who he was, that's going to feel so much more legitimate than my Christmas newsletter where I said, hey, Liam went to summer camp and, he played basketball or something, right? So I really like these books, you can get one for each kid if you want. I keep all of my kids in one, which has a downside who's going to get the book someday, right? But it does have within it, hundreds of different prompts and allows you to, again, record them. One thing I really like is time stamping the questions and then asking them those same questions again a couple of years later and seeing how their answers change. It's pretty neat to see. What do they want to be when they grow up, right? That can change quite frequently. Another tool my wife likes, because there's a downside to a physical book. It can be lost, be destroyed. There's only one copy of it. Sometimes when I'm trying to do this with my kids, I can't find the book. There's practical limits to using a physical medium. So my
So
wife.
Excuse me, is this a book that you write in? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah, you write into it.
Oh, okay.
Buy it.
Something that's downloaded that you can.
Yeah, they're prompts. It's pretty neat.
Oh, okay.
They give you the question in it. You can write out, whatever you want. Some of them are more colorful than others, and that helps engage the kids too. Like, is it hard for them to fall asleep at night? So they engage with it very strongly. They actually approach me. They could do portraits of themselves in there. Yeah, they really engage with it and will pull me and say, Dad, we need to do our question today. So that tells you they're far more engaged in it than if it was me trying to harass them, right, to participate. Any other questions on this one? So I just note that it's on Amazon. You can procure one for yourself. That sounds like the sort of way you would want to engage, with kids or a grandkid, someone that you're spending time with. Another example is Keepsake. My wife uses this one, and she did for a number of years. What's nice about it is it just texts you prompts, sometimes sporadically throughout a week, and it will, remind you as a result to do it. And you can text to that number that they give you, and it will record your responses to those questions. And then it will compile them in a book for you, if you so want. So I'll give you an example over here. You can see, do people still see my screen? I should make sure. Yes, okay. So you can see this, we have different journals in here. I got one for Liam, one for Evie, and one for Eric, my 3 oldest children. And we get to, go and note things about them. Some of them aren't always great. This one's, classic, have you had any particularly sweet moments with Eric lately? Oh, and my wife's response was, Eric has been in the doghouse a lot. He was doing okay at potty training, but took a turn for the worst. It's hard to remember the sweet moments when there was as much poop on the walls as we had today. Eric did give me some very loving snuggles today, and he very sweetly kissed me on both cheeks during his tuck-in, just like he does every night. So she found the positive from that poopy mess. But what's fun is you can take a few pictures and record these in, and if you want, you can compile them together into a book. So this is one that it auto populates everything in the questions for you. This is from my daughter. And then it kind of has some of the prompts that some of them repeat. So they'll just put the question at the top, and you can go and see, what it is that, they said. And oh man, the kids love it. Like, they just want to sit there and read through all the answers together, and they want to hear about, their lives. My daughter thinks it's hilarious that she always used to say my instead of I, or ogre instead of yogurt, or that she thought merpups were lurpups. She just connects with those little details of her childhood. So I think this is a nice alternative to this book. This one it's already physical. It's something you can bring with you. Maybe you're the kind of person that likes writing stuff down and the kids can be next to you as you do it. This one's kind of more, you're reflecting on your day you've sat on in your armchair or wherever you are, and you're either texting or speaking to text, what's happened. I don't know, has anyone had any experience with Keepsake before? Is this a new exposure to all of you?
It's new to me. I haven't seen it before.
Yeah. Okay, probably again, something more appealing to you if you have kids or grandkids. I don't see you doing this much with your own life, but you could, I guess, if one tailored it, right?
Now, Marty, this is like a subscription thing?
This one does have a subscription. Now, I haven't had a subscription for a couple of years, so it'll still store it and you can still leverage it after you've turned off your subscription.
Okay.
You could download all of your texts or memories from this too if you wanted to bring it over to another format, which is personally what I would do. I like shaping books myself. All right, so that is those. I understand those are slightly more, kid focused, so we don't need to, over dwell on those. I'm going to turn next to, let me go from here, onto photo books. Photo books, I think, can serve a lot of great purposes. They can't serve every purpose, but the great thing about a photo book is it allows you to take your digital photos, your digital records that you've got, and convert them into a print medium. Now, we're always thinking, or at least we've been raised in the last 20 years, oh, go digital, take everything digital. Well, that's great, except your kids aren't going to look at your digital photos. Family, you probably won't even look at most of your digital photos. Maybe once every 4 years, you'll hop into that folder and you'll be like, oh yeah, I took photos. And then you're like reconnecting with them. You will find that you and your children and other people will much more connect with a physical book that got the photos than something that is just stuck on a computer. I know there's the neat little photo frames, but the resolutions are all different. I don't think they work too well personally. So there's a few good services here that I really like. One's called Mixbook. The other one is Shutterfly. This is a Shutterfly book. The reason I like Shutterfly is it's always got some pretty good deals. Often you'll see like for $40, a hardcover book with up to 100+ color pages, which is pretty reasonably priced. And so every year I will take photos that we've taken as a family, and I will then go drop them into their software that they've got. It's a very easy layout tool, as I'll quickly show you. But as you can see, you can just drop photos of various sorts in there. I don't not one to put a lot of text in them because I find like that's actually really difficult to do in a lot of the software. And if you wanted, you could just get a pen and write in the white space what something is if you want to get the interest to do it. So I'm going to quickly pop over here into Shutterfly. You can see this is from the book I just showed you, and it's got a really easy interface here to modify. There's little arrows from which you can kind of get a preview of the book, but there's pre-suggested layouts for the photos that you can just drop in and modify as you want, and it'll reshape the photo for you in the area that you want. So if I wanted just one photo on a page, I could do that. Maybe I want 4, I can drop this in and it's going to immediately reconstitute itself to be for those photos. I can drag one and move it over. And then from my repository of photos that I have, I can just very easily, I should have gone up this way. I can easily just drop in other photos as I so wish to populate the rest of my book. And I find that really, really super convenient. Sometimes laying out photos can just seem like it takes way, way too long, and then you don't get it done. But this is just really, I think, intuitive and allows you to very quickly build out from their preset templates your own photo book. I don't know if anyone uses photo books. Am I unique in that regard?
We've done a lot of, not a lot, but quite a few in the past. We haven't done any for the last few years, but for Christmas, our son always did one of the year's, things that happened during the year for all of our children, and put pictures in from everybody. And it was kind of like a year in review. And my daughter uses Shutterfly all the time.
Yeah, so highly recommend this software and this product. Just know that you really should try to wait for the sales. You can tell this is usually $165. So waiting for a $40 sale is really a good discount. So just be aware of that. The other one I like is Mixbook. I'm bringing this one up so that you can see different ways of using photo books. So photo books should be visual. They shouldn't have lots of text, but they don't necessarily need to be photos. So my grandmother was a painter, right? I hardly knew she painted much until she got much older. She was about to pass, and then she did pass, and there's all this artwork of hers that was shoved up inside of an attic. And I was like, Dad, I don't want you to just chuck all these paintings. I kind of want to experience them and have other people be able to experience them before you get rid of them. So I rented some camera and some lighting and took pictures of all of her paintings. And then I was able to then, put them into a book that I could, share with, other people. And so using Mixbook to kind of compile in, her different paintings and just throwing one or a couple on a page and putting them together thematically allowed me to, share with my kids and other people. I bought one for my dad, for my brothers, a very easy way to kind of connect with and be like, oh, grandma was a painter. This is the kind of work that she did. So I think it's important to try to expand your horizons to thinking about what a photo book could do for you when you think about your family history. Has anyone else used a photo book in a unusual way? Okay, nothing wrong with that. So jumping back over here, this is from my grandmother. I will call out, when it comes to family history specifically, photo books have some utility. When you look at like trying to put in a timeline or having more of a kind of scrapbooky approach where you're putting in photos and having light text, I feel a photo book isn't bad. And many of them have preset templates that already create timelines for you, or put out a nice scrapbook like layout for family history, and so that they can be useful for you to speed up putting together a family history scrapbook. The same thing could be true of a family cookbook, which is on the right side here, by which you could put in family favorite recipes. What I would caution against, though, is anything that's really heavy on the text. The software is meant to be laid out like one page at a time or a spread at a time. That doesn't work too well when you got a lot of text that's going lots of pages, where your page numbers are changing as you shift text, where you want a table of contents and there's dynamically changing pages, where you want to guide styles. This really isn't designed for that. So if you're going to be text heavy, I do not recommend a photo book. But if you're trying to be very visual, a photo book can be a very affordable option that can be shared with family members. They can download the links themselves. They can go, print them off. So if you had a scrapbook on a particular family member, someone could just grab that link, print it off, and get it delivered straight to their home. There's some definite value to that. So that's the photo book. Next is YouTube. YouTube is, I don't always love it in my house. My kids are always popping it open, looking at, it's sometimes a Mark Rober video these days, but other times it's Mr. Beast or some other, I think, waste of time videos. But there's also a lot of really excellent material on YouTube too, which can be used for family history. Many people have created videos that apply to your ancestors that you can use to, learn quite a bit about them. So, or at least about their professions. So in England, some of my ancestors were hatters or hat makers, involved in different part of the hat making process. It was pretty complex, from the people that dealt with the furs to those that, pulled out, coarse hairs, to actually did the felting process and the planking and the finishing of the hat. So having my kid read some academic article on that isn't going to happen. It isn't. It never is. I'm not even going to get most of my family members to do it. However, to point to them, hey, you heard like, Mad Hatters, that was a real thing, that they got mercury poisoning from carroting or curing, the fur to try to make it felt better when it wasn't beaver hair fur. They can watch a video on that, and that's fun for them. One was a butcher, and how we used to cut meat and what meat was used for is very different back then than it is today. So for them to be able to watch a video that explains to them, what a butcher's job was like, is much more enlightening than, me trying to get them to read an encyclopedia article. One thing I thought was really fun, I don't know if anyone's ever done this, but there is guided walking tours of many of these cities in which your ancestor lives. So the one in the top right here is from Holton, Yorkshire, where my ancestors are from. And someone went through and it has nice subtitles throughout it, by which I could learn very much about the town and get a very strong sense of what it was like versus just, say, studying a Google map. So has anyone ever used YouTube in this way to engage with their hometowns of their ancestors?
I just had an experience this past week. My mother was born in a little town called War, West Virginia. And there's a man that's been going around in McDowell County where that's located. And he's been filming all these little small towns and telling the historical data. And he just did one on War, and he's going to do one on the little town that I was born in. And I thought those were really interesting. So I've been downloading them, keeping them. But it surprised me that I found that's on Facebook.
That's awesome. And like, it just like allows you to connect with the place all the more. And if you were to plan out a physical trip to the location, at least for myself, as I looked at these, I thought, wow, I have a better sense of where I want to go, what I'd want to do, versus if I just showed up, right? I'm like, what am I going to see? So that's neat. You have to subscribe to that guy or give him a thank you for his work. Anyone else? I'll take that as a no. That's all right. But YouTube can be your friend here. There's a lot of excellent, videos that people are making that can enlighten you about your past. Not everything's on YouTube. There are just other independent filmmakers too that can give a lot of insight into, your ancestry. One of my ancestors from Germany migrated to the United States, started first in Pennsylvania, and then ended up in Slatersville. Slatersville, as this notes here, was one of the first really industrialized mills in the United States. And a filmmaker for the last several years has been working on creating an 11-part video series all on Slatersville, where he lived for a number of years. He was a dyer. So no surprise that he would be in a mill involved with clothing. So I'm excited. This is coming out in the fall, and PBS is putting it on locally to Rhode Island, but I'm certain I'll be able to get access to it outside of that, so that whether I got to pay for it, that's irrelevant to me. But I'm going to be able to be exposed to so much more detail than the little records I'm able to find online by myself. So don't limit yourself to YouTube. Do look at other resources that can give you a perspective. All right, next is some of the fun Google tools. I don't know if anyone has used these. Does anyone ever mess around with Google Earth or the Google Street Views? Okay.
Yes, lots.
Right. So I'm
The
getting
1950 census has come out, and I've been doing my county that I grew up in. I Google it to see where it is. Everybody on there is older than me, so I doubt if I know anybody, but it's fun to see, what the houses look like and stuff. Right.
I like it too. Of course, the world has changed since our ancestors lived. Sometimes their homes are not there, or it's very different. This shot here is in Boston, Jamaica Plain, where my German ancestor, the one who was in Slatersville, eventually set up his own dye works right here, and did that for quite a number of years till there was a big accident and kind of shut it down. But when you go to just the historical records that are available there, you can only see that there was this property that he owned right there on Brookside, and across the Stony Brook stream, the creek here, that is no longer visible to the public, that he had this property on either side, and then here's the railroad. So in that picture here, you can't see that river anymore. The railroad's over here on the top left, but these buildings I don't believe are his anymore. But it still gives you a sense of, hey, where was he, right? So I like those quite a bit. The three-dimensional thing is a lot of fun for the kids. They love seeing the earth pop around and move around as the way you want. They just think, oh, that's so neat that you can go right out of the curvature of the world and pop into wherever you want. So that one's big. The other one, of course, that we mentioned was the street view. So you can find old photos of places your ancestors used to live. Like here's Marion Street, Salt Lake City. Right, this is a memory within Family Search, and this home is still around. You can hop right in and look at Marion Street, and the home is the same. Yeah, it's been repainted, so the wood has been changed, and you can see, man, this yard has not been cared for well since the pandemic. But one thing I hadn't been exposed to before, and I don't know if you have too, is the street views that Google records as it comes by the street. They're actually all kept. So if you click through here, you can actually see it at different moments in time. So this is it in 2007 when they came through. Then they came through in 2011, and it's slightly different. This yard looked a lot better back then. 2014, now it's starting to definitely decay some. This poor tree. it's not going to make it, and then it is definitely gone. I just thought that is neat that they're storing that historical.
How did you get it to do that?
Yeah, no worries. So when you select, the address, and you go
Yeah.
into, I'm happy to just start from the
I
beginning.
mean, how did you get the different times? I've used that all the time, but I didn't know there would.
Yeah, you have
the-
to click on it. So you'll see how it says Street View June 20. Click on it. It'll allow you to look at different times associated with it.
Okay.
So yeah, another fun way to, I think many of us think, wow, I want to go to where my ancestors were. I'm going to go walk there. And this in some ways allows you to do that from the comfort of your home. And also I think save you from disappointment, like walking down a street where it's now an industrial park and there's a Walmart there. That's not really very exciting to go visit, right? You're not gonna be like, wow, I really can connect with those Walmart trucks. Well, like here, I'm like, oh, it's still here exactly as it was in the photo. Yeah, when I'm in Salt Lake, I'll go drop by, right? It's a way of, I think, pre-qualifying places you may want to visit.
Marty, you're using Google Maps as opposed to Google Earth, aren't you?
Yes.
Right now on
yes.
this? Okay.
Google Earth, and then this is a street view, just normal Google Maps. Just.
Okay.
I went out on Google Maps. We moved to Portland, Oregon back in 1954, and my sister had our address where we lived. So I went out there and did the street view and found the picture of the house, and I copied it for our record. I would have never found it because I was still a small child and I had no idea what the address was. But it was interesting. I could go and look at it.
Huh. Yeah, and you might even be able to, if you didn't know the address, just kind of walk your way through, like, I remember it was somewhere near here, and kind of progress yourself through to find it. Yeah. Huh. So anyway, nifty tool, very visual. I think fun for people to do and to connect with. All right, let me go back. On to some participatory family history. Obviously, there's the occupational field trip. Over in Denton, England, where my ancestors were hat makers or hatters, there is a hat works. I could go in there, and they've refurbished or changed up one of these hat factories and turned it into a museum where you can actually participate in some element of the process. Taking your family on a field trip, even if it's a family reunion. Not saying the reunion of the family can all make it to Denton, England. Most of us don't have the money for that. I get that. But just hitting some place that may be more local, but still shares or teaches a similar concept, like there's hat making factories in the United States, just as there were in England, could give you a different view and different appreciation for what your ancestor did. Then there's skills. I mentioned the fishing knots at the beginning of this training, but there's other things too. As a fisherman, they sailed. Being on a sailboat, experiencing that boom fly out and knock you off the boat, as this happened to me before, that can be a fun experience. With a butcher, you could go and dry cure your own meat. You could get a bucket with your kids, get some meat, fill it up with salt, put it inside, weigh it before and after, and make sure it drops its weight by the 35 to 45% that it should, and kind of show them what it was like for people prior to the refrigerator to go and cure their meats. So again, a way of immersing them in the experience, or yourself in the experience, versus just reading about it. Cookbooks can be a fun way to connect. I know our ward earlier this year did a family history potluck where everyone took either from their culture, from their family member, something that they made, as long as they appreciated that family ancestry recipe, and made it for our church congregation to enjoy. While I was doing some family history the other day, I didn't really have any recipes from my grandmother on my mother's side, my maternal grandmother. But while I was searching in newspapers.com, I found this one she submitted in San Bernardino for pecan rolls. And so I could go and make this now, this one that she submitted there. So sometimes going through the newspaper and finding something to cook can be fun. My kids love to eat, so getting them to do this is a no-brainer. Easy for them. Other one is crafts. My son told me before I did this training, the most fun thing that I had him do family history wise was to take an old family photo that had a residence that one of my ancestors used to live in. This is Minerva Teichert's father, Frederick Kohlhepp, and he rebuilt it within Minecraft. So I challenged him to do this, and he had a lot of fun being on the tablet and looking at the photo and rebuilding that building as best as he thought he could. You know, not obviously fully aware of what the interior would look like, but he got to imagine that and do that. So that's on the participatory front. This next section I'm going to shift to is very much around books. I talked about some books beforehand, but there's definitely you know, other parts about books and book writing that I want to make sure that we cover. The first is just collecting books about your ancestors. Now, yes, I do understand that this probably means that your ancestor is somewhat more famous, or that you've got a, you know, a huge genealogy background for someone in your family who's bothered to write a book about them. But it's pretty fun to go and collect them. This is one on my wife's side of the family. We're not related to David O. McKay, but rather the person who went on the journey with David O. McKay, Hugh Jin Cannon, was my wife's great-grandfather. And so he kept a you know, journey log of their travel around the world. And then his son, who's my wife's grandfather, went and published it. So it's been fun for us to get that book and be able to read and connect into that experience. Other parts of my ancestry was wilder, like Wild Bill Hickman, who killed many people. And his life is pretty interesting and renegade to read. I've read this book a couple times. But my point is, there's a treasure trove of information that sometimes your kids will find is really fun, especially if it's more visual, like you see that Minerva Teichert pageants and paint one. They will flip through this very easily and just see, hey, cool, that's what she painted. This is what, you know, she was doing. They may not read all the text associated with it. That's fine, but it's still a way of connecting them. So if you're not so fortunate as to be able to have books on particular family members, which I understand probably many people are in that category, there's still books that are around the events in your ancestors', you know, lives. My great grandfather did work in or participate in the Mormon Battalion, right? And so it's interesting to find accounts, narratives from other fellow soldiers that were in that battalion as to what their experience was like. So I could try to piece together what his journey, what his experience was in that army, working somewhat as a medic. Another one was a midwife for quite a number of years out in Idaho. Being a midwife, she delivered hundreds of babies. She used lots of medicine we wouldn't necessarily use today. I remember she'd put herself to bed with chloroform sometimes. But it is still fun to read and realize what it would have been like for her as a midwife doing her job. So this is, I think, a good way of getting more immersed in the life of the ancestor. Then there's public domain works. Maybe your ancestor has written a book. It's not about your ancestor necessarily, but rather it is something that they've done. Some books are copyright protected. Not all are. Once you get to 95 years after a book that was created, you know, between 1923 and 1977, it just needs to be, you know, 95 years after its publication. When it's after 1978, it has to be 70 years after the death of the creator. Why? Corporate money, Disney keeps pushing this copyright, you know, years. They keep extending it out because they don't want Mickey Mouse to go to the public. But in the meantime, if you've got a work of yours, of an ancestor that was created, you can actually consume it and recreate it, even sell it if you wanted. I'm not saying we're trying to make money here. That's not my intention. But my point is you have ultimate flexibility with that work. So one of my ancestors is Minerva Teichert. She did write a few books. One went in public domain this last year, and I'm able to, you know, freely recreate it. So it's available on archive.org. I don't know if people are familiar with the Internet Archive. I highly recommend it as a resource. It's excellent as a book repository and other repository of just documents, periodicals, newspapers, which you can often find sources you wouldn't otherwise in your family history research. So in here, they digitized from a library a copy of my ancestors' book, and I can't buy this. This thing isn't online. I mean, it's out of print. There's no way I could, get my own physical copy of it. I've looked for years, but they have the material in it, and so I can actually go and recreate this book by taking the text, porting it over to a document that has it all in there, and then from there, moving it into a much more modernized look and feel. The thing that I've noticed too is my grandmother or great grandmother was very disappointed with some of the output of the book. You can tell, look at this drawing, that she did, it really didn't come out well. She was very disappointed with that. And even though that's the one that kind of went out to the public, well, many of these sketches of hers are still available so that, I can restore it more to the way that she would have intended it, to be. Now, it wouldn't have had all the color, mind you, it would have been more grayscale and charcoal, but hey, the fact that I have hers, more in its color form, it allows me to create a kind of refreshed medium for her own work. That makes sense? All right, so that's the public domain. Then there's memoirs. There are so many memoirs out there. I think it's an exciting time. I blame Family Search for this in the best of possible ways. And that is many of our grandparents had brothers or sisters that had records, and they never made it to your side of the family. Mine didn't, I can tell you that. And so it's finding on Family Search, a great uncle or the sister of your grandfather, or even, their parents' kid, siblings' kids, the cousins of them. They have so many little memoirs that you can find in Family Search that you can then kind of weld together to create a story about your ancestor. It may not necessarily be something you need to put together as much it is to simply just represent it, put it in a digital format, and then illustrate it in a way that is engaging. So this example I have on the screen is of my dad's mother, Doris. So Doris Polito, Giddens Polito, she wrote, based on my dad's request, a handwritten memoir to him, dating each entry and sharing things about her life. She didn't get all the way through it, but she got enough through that it tells a large chronicle of her life. I took that and I converted it initially, like I had over here, into something that was just a Word doc. But I knew I needed to go to something more than that. Why do I say that? So when I was a kid, my great grandfather Tykert, Nerv Tykert's husband, he wrote an autobiography. And my grandmother handed it to me. She was like, "You should read this." And I looked at this 40-page typewriter autobiography, and I thought, yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. Hard pass. And I didn't read it. I didn't engage with it until I was in my 30s. And then I read it and I thought, oh my goodness, this thing's incredible. Why didn't I read this sooner? And the reason was the presentation was poor, right? It was just hard to engage with. So I said, I'm not going to make that mistake, or that I'm not going to be satisfied with that from my family history as I try to disseminate it to my children. So instead, I've worked hard to come up with ways of visualizing that material that is shared in there. One, putting it in a typewritten format, of course, but then finding material and sometimes even taking photos myself that I think connect with the material well. So if you take that bottom picture that has a pumpkin, that's a real pumpkin that I cut into and lit up and took a picture of. My great uncle could not say the word pumpkin for the life of him, and it drove his mother crazy that he kept saying pumpkin and pumpkin and pumpkin. So I just thought, wow, this would be really fun on a Halloween to carve this out and then be able to use it as an element in my book. So there's ways in which you can, use pre-existing material that you have, whether it's photos, sometimes it's just flavor pictures, like other people have taken them. It's just referring to the material that you're noting in the memoir that I think will help whoever's reading it engage with it more. Has anyone else tried to convert a memoir into something that's more digestible?
Not yet.
Sorry, what was that?
Not yet. I plan to.
Yeah, not yet, right?
I've got other projects I'm trying to finish.
Yeah, and there's an infinite number, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about this process. You know, I've only done 2 so far. This one is on my grandma Doris. I've also done one on Herman Teichert based on that old typewritten, you know, biography, you know, from long ago, which I referenced. And I'm working on others. Some are harder to do because there isn't a nice lengthy memoir that they did, right? You have to do the grunt work and try to build it out and cobble together multiple stories from different people. And there's a lot into that collection process. Sometimes it's available on Family Search and Memories, and you can just download the picture or the PDF that may be posted up there. In other cases, it's more of a grunt work project. So you're going over to grandma's house or in uncle's house, and you're going into their closet, and they got a bunch of files and different things in there, letters, and you take out a document scanner, and you're just kind of plowing away, documenting that material because you know that those family members aren't going to be there forever. I did that with my Colehep ancestors before my grandparents passed, and I was so grateful that I'd done that because no one knows where that material is anymore. So it's only my digital documents that have it. Other times there's tape or video recordings, which you can transcribe. I did in another training provide some guidance on artificial intelligence assisted transcription, which I'm still a big fan of, like with Otter AI. So if you've got some old audio recordings that are hard to understand, definitely use those so that you're not doing too much grunt work all on your own. Another neat resource that I found for myself was the church's own archives. So for those—
Can I make a comment there?
Go ahead.
I'm going to make a comment. There's one of my pet peeves is people take so many photographs and they never write anything on the backs of them. And I inherited a lot of photographs from my grandmother, and I used to ask her who these people were, and she'd go, "Oh, you know who that is? That's so and so on so and so side." Well, she's dead, and I don't know these people. And every photograph I've ever taken, I write the date, where it was taken, and who's in the picture. And it's time consuming. But one day when I'm gone, if I don't do that, my kids are not going to know who some of these people are or when they were taken and where they were taken.
Amen.
Encourage people to do that.
Yeah, please do that, including digitally. So in another training, I talked about metadata. So yes, you have a file name in which you can put information. You can also modify the photo's properties and put in things like subjects, people involved, dates taken. It's really, I think, key, as you said. Otherwise, they'll just be like, I don't know who these random people are.
Well, all my digital pictures, when I named the file, I named their names and the dates. So I got long file names.
I bet they do. All right, I don't know if anyone's ever used, let me get another tab here. LDS Church Library Catalog. So if you have members in your family that are part of this faith, and I'm sure there's other faiths that have similar repositories, but you may find that some of your ancestors actually have a lot of material in this catalog. Have we already reviewed this ever in a prior training?
I've never done that one.
Okay, I just
No,
don't.
I don't think we've done that. In fact, that's new to me, and
Yeah, so this is my ancestor, and you can just type in the name of an ancestor. Sometimes they'll have it available digitally, other times they won't, but these are reminiscences that my great grandmother wrote, the midwife, and she wrote them on this paper. What's actually, she wrote all the names of all the people that she gave birth to, which is kind of interesting too. But this is a 58-page document, maybe more like 20, 29, once you take out the backs. But it's just, her story that she wrote in there. I didn't have a copy of this document prior. This is something I found strictly through this catalog. Then they will take requests too. So I had another search result in here. Where they didn't have it digitized yet. And I made a request for them to digitize this book. It's an account book, right? And most of it in there is just normal, common, everyday publications, rates of postage, there's little stories in them. However, there are blank pages where she does say, more things about, her life itself. So, December the 1st, 1881, came home to North Ogden, the same month on the 27th, found Ella, that's her daughter, very sick. So, she's got these entries that are part of her journal, which, yes, they're interspersed with things that aren't relevant, but I thought, wow, that's really neat. Not only have their handwriting, you can kind of get little entries into their life. So the church got on it pretty quick. I think it only took them about 2-3 weeks for them to do my digitization request. And then I got this, material that I could add into my family history. So do take a look at it. There's some excellent stuff. One that blew my mind away was some of us have like some old, not very good family history photos, and the negatives are somewhat still available by the church. And so I was able to get photos of quality I didn't even think were possible from the church family history library catalog. So let's see if this one boots up here. So there's one portrait. Let's see if this one is in here. It's negative. Okay, well, this one didn't come up as easily, but I can tell you there is in his negative collection one where I can blow up incredibly big with great detail, which just, every wrinkle in his face, everything. I was like, holy smokes. I didn't know that the church had this resource for me that I could engage with to, incorporate in. I had letters from one of my other ancestors writing to one of the prophets of the church, trying to get them to build a settlement in Utah outside of Tooele. So don't neglect this. It's not part of the family history catalog. It's the church history catalog, but there's an intersection there which could be relevant for your family history work.
Hey, Marty, if someone has a book that they would like to digitize, over at the Dallas Public Library, we've got missionaries over there that are going through and digitizing all the books in the family history department. But they have the Dallas Genealogical Society has purchased the camera and stuff or a second camera, aside from what the missionaries use so people can come in and take pictures of their books and things. And I guess you have to make an appointment to do it probably, but it's, it digitizes it. It's the same kind of machine that the missionaries use to digitize books, if anybody's interested.
They're very cool. I've seen them over at the Harold B. Lee Library in Provo, Utah. Yeah, they can help you with like journal books or other books and just, photograph them, record them very quickly.
Now, where are you finding this at? That's not part of Family Search, is it?
It's not. This is catalog.churchofjesuschrist.org.
Catalog of Church of Jesus Christ.
Yep. So again, it may only apply if you're come from more pioneer heritage or one's more involved in the church's history itself. Doesn't mean they need to be the most famous person on the planet by any means, but you can get some good material out of this if you have some connection to the church's history. All right, let me hop back here. So that's another resource for you to build out your memoirs. Then there's newspaper articles, which I've shared in the past. We've already talked about letters and journals. So then there's, of course, taking all of that lovely, lovely material and trying to form it into something that you can use. Digitizing is the first step. There's OCR readers that can help you with things that are like typewritten documents. There's things that are free online for this. This is one I've used called, onlineocr.net. You can point it to a file that you've got. This is, one of mine. Pulls up or just show you here. So this is a 10-page document. I've loaded it up in here, this PDF of typewritten information that is not at all digitized. And I can say, hey, I'd like this in a Microsoft Word document. I can hit convert, and it will take some time to then go and read through the visuals of the typewritten information in the PDF and convert it into something that is already digitized for me. It's not perfect. I would never completely 100% trust this, but it is much better than starting from scratch and simply trying to type it all out yourself. There will be typos. It will misread things. There's no question. However, it will help you be faster. So that is what I recommend when you have a document that is not handwritten, but rather used through the instrumentality of a typewriter, right? So I'll let that crank away there so you can see my output. I also mentioned transcription tools for audio, which you can use and also then pull away. Once you've done that, you kind of need to annotate them. You need to say, hey, what belongs to what? Where is this relevant for my particular ancestor? Someone's memoirs might only tangentially related to what you're trying to focus on, but sections of it matter, and you need to guide yourself as to what to use. Then you need to organize them in a way that's helpful. So what kind of memoir are you trying to tell? Are you trying to just capture it and reproduce it as is? Are you trying to focus on just a particular part of their life? Maybe it's their war years as they served in World War II. Maybe it's when they're in medical school. You might want to be very narrow in your scope, or you may want to be very broad, and it's important that you decide that. My suggestion is always to keep things very simple. So you can see in pink that language KISS. I think some of us have heard the term keep it simple, stupid. Because if you don't do that, you're going to create this enormous project that you will never complete and no one will ever get to enjoy. My recommendation for any initial project is to make it as simple and short as possible initially, so you get just the experience of building a product and disseminating it. If you do your magnum opus first, good luck. You're going to hit a lot of hard knocks. You probably won't get it done. So create the right scope for yourself and think about, whether you really have the bandwidth to accomplish it. Then you need to really try to construct the story. Determine what to keep. Too often in stories, do we keep every little tidbit of information? I've read so many little biographies on Family Search where it's Marty Polito, let's use my name here, was born on May 16th, 1984. A week later, he was christened here in this church on this day. And it is the most dry, boring drivel that there's no possible way anyone except yourself wants to read it. So how do you move beyond that? And that's what's tricky, right? You have to really try to create some style, right? I have on the picture here, this is Ben Stiller from Zoolander, and who's giving us this fashionable blue steel fashion impression that he's giving, which is silly. But the intention is, how do you present your material in a way that is striking and engaging? You can't just list a bunch of facts and hope that they'll cling together and engage your audience. You have to think about what's important and then supplement it with analysis and reaction, emotional reaction, so that it is something meaningful to other people. Is there a core message to this person's life that you think needs to stand out? And if so, how do you make your writing do that? So I'm going the wrong way. And I think I'm almost on time here. So I know I can't get into all this, but just realize, I got this example here on the left of the boring kind of drivel that sometimes we're all guilty of writing it. I've written it. In fact, it's often my starting place is the drivel, because I'm just getting the facts and jotting them down. But who wants to read that one on the left side of where he was born, here's a date, he was christened, he was born a date, and then his brother was christened, here's another date, versus someone on the right saying, hey, I'm going to look and see in summer of 1857, what was the weather like? What's that church like in the inside? How are the pews? What was the family size at this time? I'm going to try to contextualize and think about what it would have been like to be there at that day. We know this other kid of theirs in that family had already passed away, but she was christened there. Was that a bittersweet moment for the mother? So being imaginative but accurate is going to engage people far more than just popping out a bunch of facts, which is somewhat what you even get in Family Search, right? When you do the story, it'll just kind of say, this person, this is where they were and this is what they did. Well, great, except no one wants to read that. So I recommend finding facts, but then giving context and then adding an imagination. This is an example of one I did. I'm not going to spend the time on it because I don't have the time. And here's another example of just what's in a name. My ancestor's name was Samuel Barry Wallace. That can seem whatever, that's his name. Except Barry was the name of his mother's old husband who died. Why does he have the middle name of this other husband? Why would his dad want to name him with the middle name of the old spouse. Thinking about that sort of thing and contextualizing that in the story is a much more gripping way of talking with people about your ancestor. So once you've done it and brought it all together, you've got to edit it. You're going to make typos. You're going to be boring. You're going to write things in not very good ways. Allow other family members to coach you as to what's engaging or not. I'll ask my daughter, is this boring? And she'll be like, yes, Dad, this is terrible. Sometimes she's blunt, as can be. But I get to keep working at it until it's better. Now, my daughter is not necessarily the standard for what I think is good writing. So, you need to bounce it off other people. But make sure that you're getting feedback before you've claimed to yourself that it's done. Don't think that you're going to catch typos easily either. I read it completely aloud to myself, because if I don't read it aloud, my eyes will just skip over it because I'm so familiar with the material that I'll miss the typos. So don't allow yourself to cheat yourself in terms of catching those errors. And then you got to just keep revising it until it's something more enjoyable. How am I doing on time? Am I already up?
Always have to have someone proofread it after me, because I know what it's supposed to say, and I'll look at a word that is the wrong word and I'll still say the word I think it's supposed to be. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't see my own mistake a lot of time because I know what it's supposed to be saying, and my kids sometimes will proofread for me and they'll find all kinds of things.
Now, another set of eyes is very key. I sometimes will write words how they sound instead of how they're supposed to be truly spelled. And they'll be like, oh crap, it was spelled right, but not the word I was supposed to use.
Yeah.
You're going to say something, Brother Johnson?
He was telling me to tell you that the time is up.
Okay. Do we want me to wrap, or do you want me to spend 3 to 4 more minutes finishing? I don't care.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead and finish.
Okay. If people need to drop, I won't be offended. So the next step, once you've really revised it and you've got your text down, you've narrowed your scope, you feel like you finessed something to something that's mildly legible, for other people to enjoy, is then to populate it in software in which you can go and make it into a book. This is more complicated than a photo book, right? A photo book, you're able to just drop pictures in very quickly and use these pre-established templates. While there are templates for book writing, they may not be to your liking, and you may not be able to use their software as well. So the first thing I recommend is when you look at publishing a book, when you've finished your text, is to really understand the limitations of the publisher. Self-publishing is really big now. There's lots of people, that can help you out, but you want to understand, can you interact use their software well? Can you use the templates that they have? If they don't, that's going to be a problem. Because if you just create your own layout and then hope a publisher will work with it, you could find yourself redoing a lot of work. This happened to me in my first book. I created my own InDesign, document. I really thought, hey, this would be great. I'll just export it to PDF and send it to a publisher and I'm done. Well, they didn't follow the dimensions I did, and they had other requirements. And so I had to recreate the book. Now, it wasn't straight from scratch because I had a lot done, but I still had to do, several hours of effort that were wasted. And that if I just done it, with this in mind from the beginning. So I'm trying to help you not hit the speed bumps that I did. So not everyone's going to have access to, InDesign. This is an Adobe product. It allows you to very well stylize and create, your books to your liking. I did it because I'm familiar with the software. I like it. I wanted something where I could have the text, in the middle, which I guess I can, let's see if I can pop right in here. You can see this is one of the books that I was working on. And I wanted something that would have a picture on either side of my document, and that I could also give information. So I heard one pet peeve of not, documenting what a photo is. So I just put in this vertical column on every page who it is or what it referred to, so that a person could turn the book and then see that on the picture if they so wanted that. And I just had the text flow through. And once I laid the text out, which was key, I could then decide what visual element fits well with the text on this page. Just because I've got a picture of someone doesn't mean that's what they're talking about. How do I make sure that the textual content aligns with the visual? So that was the work I had to do, is laying out the text and then finding the visuals to accompany it. You're going to have a lot of your own photos that you can use. I've given scanning guidelines in the past as to what's really good for print or reproduction format using a master that you create, but don't think that you're limited to that. There's lots of great tools online. Google image search is one of my great buddies. So you can do an advanced image search. I don't know if anyone's ever used this. Type in an advanced Google image search. And what it allows you to do is you can dictate the image size. This is very important when you're trying to find print-worthy photos, not just photos that you find. And you can say, hey, I'd like something that's bigger than 8 megapixels, something a large file size, and you can then dictate a topic of interest to you and then do that advanced search. That's going to limit the photos that come out simply to that size that you want. So in this case, my ancestor, my great grandfather Tykert, he wrote about Register Rock. Well, where is Register Rock in American Falls, Idaho? What does it look like? I had no idea. And so by able to get a large, photo of it, I can then just save this to my computer and drop it right within my InDesign document as a picture that can, be referenced in the text. So there's a lot of great, just thematic pictures, whether it's of the place or of people, of the town, maybe it's just what they're doing, right? An activity that just creates visual flavor to your text, but that you don't need to go purchase a bunch of photos. There's a lot in here that you can use for your personal use. So I dropped them in here. I like InDesign, but again, there's a lot of free software out there that you could also utilize from these publishers. The downside of the free software is just it's often a little bit more cumbersome to use. I've mentioned adding in the visuals, kind of did that already. So once you have got all that done, you can really send it off to the publisher to print out. You've used their guidelines, you've laid out your text, you've got your visuals, and now you get to see the end result. Sometimes you make mistakes. I made a mistake on my first one of, I thought a painting referred to my grandmother and it wasn't. So my mom got it for Mother's Day and she's like, this is not my grandmother. And so that's why it's good to have people not only proof your text, but sometimes also proof your photos or your paintings. In this case, it was a painting. So it would be great if people write things well, and online, sometimes people, and I see this in Family Search a lot, I'm rambling, I'm sorry. When you're on Family Search, you will see people say it's a photo of someone, and sometimes you trust that. You just think, oh, what someone reported there is accurate. Well, it's not always. So before you go print out a book, I would recommend having someone screen your visual material, just like they are your text. The last point I had on here was just that books is one way of going about your material, but there's other forms you could do too. You could convert the memoir into an audiobook. You could make it a visual story where you have a video of photos that are going through or stock video footage, and you're reading the memoir that someone could watch on YouTube and listen to. You could take an old interview and make it something more entertaining. What I find in old interview tapes is there's people who are talking softly and they're saying and they don't understand each other well, and it's actually a pretty miserable experience to try to listen to. So cleaning up the audio, cutting out stuff that is fluffy, and creating a more punchy audio file could also be very valuable to people, or simplifying it in a transcript. So these are my ways in which I have tried to take my family history and make it into something that I feel my kids will consume. Most of them have taken to it. I'm not going to say everything's been successful. I've had to learn over time. But I think that this is a much better way to create a treasure that my kids can enjoy for generations and even other family members. So I'm hopeful that you guys have your own tips. Maybe this stimulated something for you. Maybe there's something else you've done that we could learn from too. But I hope this gave you something to think about as you go about your own family history. Does anyone have any questions? Was there anything that stood out to people from this?
I have a question that's a little bit, I think you've done an excellent job there. And I like a lot of your ideas, the things you're showing us. But I got a question to see if anyone can help me on. For years ago, I recorded a lot of things from my grandparents and stuff. I would come home on the old cassette tapes and I would play it back, listen to it, write it down in longhand, eventually typing it. Do they make little recorders now that digitize instead of being a tape, that it's digital and can convert it? Like when you download it to a computer, it prints it? Or do you still have to type all of it?
So
Does
you
that-
are correct that there's two different tools. I did give a training on this. So one is there are like tape decks today that will record digitally as the analog plays to a file that then makes it, WAV file or an MP3, something that you can just listen to, and exchange digitally. Then you can plug that digital file into a transcription reader like Otter AI. There's others out there that will then generate a text file from the audio. Now, it's never 100% perfect. It's like the OCR. They're not always be able to understand, especially if it's an old tape, that the word's completely right. They're not going to be 100%
Well,
right. But
I'm not talking about my old tapes. I'm talking about if I want to record something now.
Yes, got it.
The newer stuff, will it, when you're recording someone, will it make like a digital recording instead of a tape? And then can you download it to where it would actually print it out?
So yes, a good example of that would even be this Zoom call that we're on. So and I'm not saying you would use Zoom, but my point is this will create a video recording and a text file transcription of what we spoke about. You can have similar recorders. You're probably going to be using your smartphone to do the recording, or a more expensive separate audio recording device, which can create a digital copy and transcribe.
Never thought about using my phone.
No worries. I get it. Yeah. The certain devices don't stand out to you, until someone points it out. You're not alone. That's me.
Well, if you record on your phone, I guess it's going to be a digital file when you download it.
Correct.
I was hoping I wouldn't have to type it. I wanted it to convert it to text.
I'm certain you can find an app that will, as you speak, write it out. There's ones that I've used I used to be on the road a lot in southern Utah in my old job, and I got sick of doing nothing in the car. So instead of just listening to audiobooks, I actually got Dragon Speak software, which writes what you speak to a file.
Yeah.
So I could do like journals or memories of my own and just while I'm driving, speak out loud, and it would write them to my laptop.
I tried that years ago, but I would forget the commands. And I'm supposed to tell it a period or a new paragraph. I go, how am I supposed to say that?
You're not alone there. I don't use it much anymore now that I'm not driving all the time. It was very, specific use case that it made sense for me.
I just didn't stay with it. I should have stayed with it longer. But anyway, I liked your presentation. You got some good ideas.
Thank you. Happy to hear some of yours too. So I can make improvements in my my own family history pursuits. So thank you all. I don't have anything more. This is the last part of the presentation, was just discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Marty. That was wonderful. I got some really good ideas myself.
Thanks. Hopefully it wasn't too intimidating. I know some parts of creating things can be difficult. Like I know many of you probably have never touched an Adobe software and never will. That's fine. I was just trying to give an example of something I'd engaged in. So I hope it wasn't intimidating.
Parts were and parts were not.